if we would like to start with Kuf Mem Beis. I think we did last week. Kuf Mem Beis. Not one that everyone knows by heart, so you're going to want a minute to find it if you like. For those who don't know it here.
We just have an English number.
142. 142.
No, because they say it every day.
Well, I'm saying, yes, you know what
Kuf Mem Beis. Maskil David Yosef Amara Svila Koli El Adonai Ezak Koli El Adonai Eschanan Eshpoch Lefanav Tzichi Sarasi Lefanav Agid V'Yitzatei V'Alai Ruchi V'Yatra Yadat V'Nesivasi V'Orach Zu Alech Tamnu Kachli Havei Yamin Urei V'In Li Makir Avad Manos Mimeni In Naresh L'Nafshi Za'akti Elech Adonai Amarti Ata Machsi Chalki Be'eretz HaChayim Hakshivari Nasi Ki Galosi Ma'od Hatzileni Mirodfai Ki Amsu Mimeni Hotzia Mimaskir Nafshi Lehodos Eshemecha V'Yafiru Sadikim Ki Sigmol Allah Achinu Kovesi Sharatu Hashtag Kaviv and Omar Amen.
I have a question before we begin.
Yes.
Why are Aramaic tefillos included in the tefillos?
Excellent.
Why
Excellent.
are what?
Aramaic.
Sometimes
like,
we'll throw in a little
right.
throw in a little Aramaic just to keep us on the edge of our
yeah, I mean,
right.
maybe English should be.
It's an excellent question. So Aramaic, which is beyond the scope of this year, is the language that Malachim don't speak, believe it or not. So we throw it in there sometimes, not to show that we're better than Malachim on this world, right? But there is an element of, it's like a back and forth between us and Malachim. You know, the Malachim are fighting, they're saying, we're closer to Hashem, and we're saying, yeah, but we have the Bechira, we have free choice, we have the opportunity. So you see that seems to have crept its way into the Aramaic, into the liturgy. So, for example, we have, although it is brought down, many opinions hold that you don't say anything that's Aramaic, you don't say without a minyan, interestingly enough. So we say, because it's almost as if, like I believe it's something to do with the extent that it creates like an unfair playing field, where if you have a minyan, we'll let you say the Aramaic to defeat the Malachim, to be one over the Malachim. But if you're not, it's something to do that extent, then you don't get to say it. It's something to do with Malachim, and it's very Kabbalistic and spiritual, and it's like not fair. Whatever that means on a practical level. But it's interesting because it comes up by Yikum Parkam for sure, but it comes up by Slichos, by when we're saying Slichos before Yom Norayim. So it comes up a lot because, especially if you don't have a minyan right away. So you start Slichos 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, you don't have a minyan, so you're supposed to skip, halachically you're supposed to skip all the paragraphs that have Aramaic. About 30%. I mean, it's a nice amount. It's like 20, 25%. And the 13 midos, your Gimel midos rachim, you skip that as well, because that needs to be said with the minyan. So it ends up being, especially in our old shul, it was a very, it would take a while. We wouldn't get a minyan until the end of Slichos. And then, so you end up saying only about 60, 65, 70% of the Slichos. But yeah, the Aramaic is fascinating. It also comes up in a couple parshios ago, that Aramaic crept into the Torah, Yagar Sa'adusa. Right, that's where Lavan somehow snuck an Aramaic term, the name, into the Torah, and we suffered consequences as a result. What that means practically, I don't know. But it's a fascinating discussion. The whole concept of Aramaic is incredibly fascinating. For some reason, why the Malachim can't learn the language, it's like Paro, right? The Medrash says, so Dr. Konigsberg spoke. Charles should have. So Dr. Konigsberg says about the Shivim Lashon. We're familiar with the Medrash that Yosef could speak all these languages. Paro could speak all the languages except for one, Hebrew. Couldn't speak Hebrew. I don't know. You speak 69 languages. You can't learn number 70. I don't know. How many people here know more than 5 languages? That would be incredibly impressive. There are people who know, I think anyone who knows more than 3 languages, you're incredibly impressed with. Is that fair? Fluent. I'm not talking about, but if they could speak 5 fluent languages, that's pretty impressive. 69 languages, couldn't learn number 70. So I don't know. I don't know why the Malachim can't learn Aramaic. They can learn Hebrew, they can learn English, they can learn Spanish, French, Russian. They can't learn Aramaic. But for whatever reason, it's like our our own
I
language.
say this, but how do you know that?
Great, yeah. Azay frek the medrash, as they say. I don't know. I can't answer that question. How do I know that? It's a good question. It's a fair question.
Domus.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
Domus.
right. Hakdamas is a whole other can of worms. Why?
Get teeth in there.
I always say Hakdamas. It's like because it's supposed to be in the middle of the night, so it's like 3 a.m. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what language, so they just throw it all out there. Hakdamas is like adding all the languages and yeah. Very good. Okay, maybe we'll talk about that before Shavuos time. Okay, so that's just a short idea that the Torah says, "Vayishma Elokim es na'akasam," not Parsha Shemos. So the beginning of the story of our salvation, where the Torah tells us that Hashem heard our cries. So the Meforshim will ask that the cries have been going on, one would imagine, at the very least, for close to 2 centuries, right? If not more. Right? They've suffered through generations of slavery, so why now does Hashem hear their cries and call Moshe into action, if you will? So the Ramban says that this is one of the many sources in Sefer Shemos for the koach tefilah, for the power of prayer. That their cries, interestingly enough, their suffering had reached such an incredible intensity, for whatever reason, why that was, and at this point we understand it to be a qualitative intensity because really it was supposed to last a lot longer. The Medrash says that we were able to get out a little earlier because the labor got harder. Later, labor got more difficult. Where the tefillos that we offered, obviously, says the Ramban, were so intense that it finally moved the needle with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what it was. It was really the tefillos that reached a point of intensity, which, albeit, only reached that point because it was so difficult. Right? So there is a sort of cat and mouse game here being played. But nonetheless, were there tefillos being offered before? Absolutely, but none to this point. Vayishma Elokim es na'akasam, that he heard these types of tefillos, and that's what ultimately led to our Geulah, led to the beginning of our salvation that we started reading about yesterday, and we'll continue throughout Sefer Shemos. Okay, so we are up to Modim. We started last week. We mentioned the idea of what we are doing in Modim. We're thanking Hashem for the miracles which we are aware, because we already took care of in Mizmor L'Soda the miracles we're not aware. Okay, Modim can mean thank, can mean acknowledge. Mentioned that last week. Fine. The repetition, you'll notice, and Debbie pointed this out last week, but during the repetition of Shemon Esrei, our job is to listen. That's it. We answer Amen. Baruch Hu Baruch Shema, whatever your custom is. But we usually just listen to the Chazan, let him do his thing, say each of his brachos, and answer Amen. That's all you got to do. Comes along Modim. Modim changes the whole dynamic. Right? I mean, think about it. All you've been doing for 3, 4, 5 minutes, however long Kezaras Hashatz might take, let's say on a weekday where you have many more brachos, although it's not much shorter. It's not much longer. It's more shorter brachos. So all you've been doing is answering Amen to brachos. Right? To brachos that you've already said. So let's say you're going to shul during the week. So you say your Shemon Esrei, now the Chazan repeats. I heard that before. It's like whenever I start, I'll review the Mishnah that I teach the girls. So then someone will say, we learned this already. Yeah, that's why it's called a review. It's yes, you're good. You remember it. That's better than the other 20 girls who have no idea what's flying. So maybe she's, at least she remembered it. But we hear that, we read the brachos, we say the brachos, hopefully with some kavanah. Then the Chazan gets up and he repeats Shemon Esrei. Same Shemon Esrei. So all we're doing is answering Amen. Now, comes along Modim, we recite this alternate version that was instituted by the rabbis known as Modim D'Rabbanan. So what are we doing? And why is it only by Modim? Right? Maybe we should be doing something with every bracha. In some Sephardi communities, they do have that.
Was it instituted later?
Very good. It was. Not too much later, though. Not too much later, but it wasn't, perhaps it wasn't right away, but it wasn't like, this isn't like a 300 year ago thing. This has been going on for a long time because the Rishonim discuss it. So that's when at least it's been going on for, 800 to 1,000 years, and probably longer as well. Good point. So the Avudah Raham says, so why do we do this only by Modim? We add our own, we're not just saying Amen at this point, we're saying a whole paragraph.
Why do we do Kezaras Hashatz?
Good question. Okay, so it's a great question, and it's one that begs to be asked. So we understand why we did it in the time without Sidurim. But there was no, and in fact, that you were Yotze with that davening, right? The Chazan would say, The Chazan had a siddur that he wrote up, maybe, or that he just memorized. That's why he was the Chazan. And you would stand there quietly, answer Amen, and that was your Shemona Esrei. Shomea ke'ona. Listening is like answering, and then you would just, then you would answer Amen, and then it would be like you would answer, you were saying each bracha that you obviously didn't know by heart. That's the norm. It was much more complicated. Although people did learn it by heart eventually, that's what happened. Then we said, well, so let's keep Chazar Hashatz, even though we all have Siddurim, and we all, even before the printing press, perhaps at a certain point, you memorized it. It's not so crazy. I say this all the time. If you had to memorize it, you probably would. If it was important to you, you would. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's not. I don't think it's that crazy. If something's important, if I told you, like I always say the joke but it's true. But I say it all the time. That it's gonna, my friend Josh, growing up, he memorized the entire periodic table of elements. He was a C student, and he asked my science teacher on Friday what he could do to get an A. He was a C- student at best, and my science teacher joke said, "Come in Monday having memorized the entire periodic table of elements." So Josh spent 48 hours. He didn't sleep Friday night. He was at my house. He memorized the entire periodic table of elements. Right?
Now he's a doctor.
He's not. No, he's not. He's definitely not. He's not. But that would be a great part of the story. And if I told you what he did for a living, you'd laugh. But it's nothing that you would be proud of any of your kids doing. But it's nothing illegal. But professional. What? It's a good question. I should ask Mr. Austin, South African fellow. I should ask him next time I'm in Baltimore. Did you actually give him an A? Maybe he gave him an A on an assignment to boost up his grade. That's what I said. But he memorized the entire. It's crazy,
Any kid that can memorize the entire periodic table could apply himself.
Correct. You know how many rabbis and teachers I had in high school said if you could memorize the Gemara the way you memorized the 1968 World Series box score. Okay, so your brain works a certain way, your mind works a certain way.
Your priorities.
Exactly. You prioritize a certain way, and that's ultimately that's what it comes down to. But it's true. Any kid could do that. Any individual could do that as well. You can memorize Shemona Esrei. So at a certain point, we did. We learned it. We memorized it. So what was the point of Chazar Hashatz then? So the point now, the Mishnah Berurah writes, is to be. There might be someone out there who doesn't understand, who doesn't know. So the Chazan gets up there, takes care of that individual. He's motzi that person. So technically you're yotzei. You could be yotzei with your Shemona Esrei by listening, because that's how it used to be. But we wouldn't say today, because if you have the opportunity to, if you know Hebrew, or at least can read Hebrew, and understand. Correct. Even if you don't read Hebrew, I'm saying, but for sure, if you could read the siddur, then there's nothing to talk about. Why would you be yotzei with someone else? Right? You have your own independent mitzvah, especially something as intimate as tefilah, talking to the divine. So, but in theory, that's why we kept it. We kept it for that possibility of someone showing up, having no idea what's flying, and maybe they'd be yotzei with the chazan. Interesting way to keep an extra 5 minutes of davening, where we're always trying to, keep it running, especially during the week. But yeah, they kept it. I always found it fascinating that they kept it for that reason. But it is what it is. Okay. So this modim d'Rabbanan business, so why is it the only bracha that we do this by? We only do this by modim. So it's interesting, the Avud Raham, one of the Rishonim, says, because when it comes to giving thanks to Hashem, we don't want to rely on Shomea Ka'ona. Meaning every other bracha, Shomea Ka'ona means listening is like reciting. That you listen to Kiddush, it's as if you said Kiddush. You have a mitzvah to hear Kiddush, you have a mitzvah to have Kiddush said. You have a mitzvah to have the shofar blown and hear it. Well, that's a discussion of the Rishonim. So you're not going to blow the shofar. I'm not going to blow the shofar. You're not going to blow the shofar, but you're going to listen. And it's like you did it. You fulfilled your mitzvah by listening. Sometimes just listening, as long as you're paying attention, you would fulfill your mitzvah. So it's the same concept here, where throughout Shemona Esrei, you listen, it's like you answered. It's like you were participating. Modim, says the Avud Raham, you got to do something more. You're giving thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you got to step up your game. You can't just listen and say Amen. There's no way we would allow, Baruch Atah Hashem, Tov Shemcha Chana Lados, and that's it, Amen, and you're done. That's not by thanking. How could you ever thank your parents enough? How could you ever thank whoever may be enough? Listening, we have to step up our game by modim. So we want to speak the words of thanks ourselves. So that's why we instituted this modim d'Rabbanan, where it's almost like it's a much longer version of an amen, but it's a version where we're saying, hey, we are involved. We want to thank you, Hashem. We want to show our appreciation, not just say, amen.
Well, we said it already.
What do you mean? Well, yeah, that's true.
Already.
Yeah, but we also said, Sim Shalom, and we also said, Slach Lanu, and but that's also important. We have a lot to ask for forgiveness.
Our
But
modim ends with a bracha.
I'm sorry?
Our modim ends with a bracha. The chazin's does not.
Correct. So that's why the chazan will then make the bracha, because the chazan needs to make 19 brachas, right? So the chazan needs to get to that. We don't make 19 brachas twice. We only do it once. It's interesting. So it's almost like its own section of Shemona Esrei that, of course, is only said when we repeat.
So the chazan doesn't say Shemona Esrei and everyone else is?
He does. He gets the extra. He gets a lot of brachos. Yeah, chazan. That's why it's brought down halacha. Interesting halacha by Yalvi Yavo. We were talking about last week or 2 weeks ago. So because it falls out in Ritzeh. So Yalvi Yavo, fascinating halacha. The chazan forgets. If I forget Yalvi Yavo, I have to repeat Shemona Esrei. Happens a lot, more than you'd think. All right, but if you repeat Shemona Esrei, what if the chazan forgets Yalvi Yavo? Chazan has to have to repeat.
Somebody's yelling
Everybody
at
else.
us.
Right? No, but someone yells, well, I don't know, he forgets. He forgets V'tein Talbat Bracha, December 6th, the first night. He just forgets, it happens. It's not as crazy as, it's always easy to play Monday morning quarterback, as they say. But, so what happens? So he can utilize Chazar Sashatz as his makeup. Interesting. Usually we don't say that, because usually we say Chazar Sashatz, not meaningless, but it has lost a lot of its luster, if you will allow me to say that. But ultimately, we allow it to kind of like help him out as like his backup. So it's interesting. But yeah, the chazan is up there, and he's saying Shemona Esrei, and he ends up getting many more brachos. That's why when people complain about being chazan, okay. Sometimes it's harder. It's not as easy as it sounds. Okay, so that
Stand during the whole emoji?
you should, yeah, if you can. I think it's Ravad Yosef says if you need to, you can kind of lean in your chair. That's, I think, some Sfaradim are makbid like that. They lean. If you can't stand, like I said last week about Yamin Orayim, for me, it's not the standing for so long. It's the standing, sitting. For me, I don't mind standing. Just tell me when I'll stand for an hour or whatever, half hour. I don't like the standing, sitting. That gets my headache rolling on Yom Kippur. But hey, what can you do? So that's why we have Modim D'Rabbanan only in Modim. It's almost as if it would be like ridiculous to just say thank you. It just wouldn't be enough. I don't know. Think about it like, someone saved your life. So you'd say, thanks, much appreciated. Have a good one. Send him a text, right? Or if someone does something incredible for you, whatever it may be, you could figure, use your imagination. Whatever it may be, someone does something, way beyond a friend, a spouse, a family member, does something that's way beyond anything past your expectations. So, you probably don't, maybe you do in today's generation. You don't say thanks, quick thumbs up text, way to go, or, hey, you say, it means a lot, it meant a lot, I really appreciate everything, whatever it is. So that's what modim is. You're right, there are a lot of other, it doesn't mean it's the most important bracha, but I think by Thanksgiving we have an opportunity to just, we need to just say thanks, a little more than just thumbs up. Okay, now, what is added? So we talked about Yal V'Yavo Ratzeh, which makes a good excuse to talk about what in Modim. What paragraph do we say? Not very good. Al Nisim. Yeah, okay, still very good. It's like when the students and I say,
Where's the question?
what paragraph do we add? That's why I said very good, because she didn't even need to hear the question. When the student is so brilliant that.
So brilliant that I read.
The students also do that. I say, can anyone tell me which rabbi argues? And they're looking on the assignment I gave them, and they say, Rabbi Meir. So that's great, beautiful. They're like, well, I saw it. I'm like, you still utilized your knowledge to better than the other 20 students who don't even know it's Mishnah class. Okay, so not in this class. That's not what I was saying here. That wasn't the analogy here. I was saying in Mishnah.
I
No,
know.
that is not the implication. Okay,
Yeah,
so
the student copies their homework. At least they try to.
at least they did something, right? Okay, Al HaNisim. So it would have been great to do Al HaNisim on Hanukkah, but beggars can't be choosers. But we're not spending much time on Al HaNisim. Don't worry. So Hanukkah and Purim do not have Kedushas Hayom, sanctity of the day, like the other Yom Tovim. So they don't have sanctity of the day, Kedushas Hayom. They don't get their own Shemona Esrei, right? We don't do Musaf on Hanukkah and Purim. aside from the fact that Musaf is only done when we used to bring the Karban Musaf. We didn't bring the Karban Musaf for Hanukkah and for Purim. Hanukkah and Purim are coming well after, as we know, although Purim, interestingly enough, the whole idea of Purim is starting after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. So there is a connection to the Beis Hamikdash by Purim. Esther's son, Darius, is the one who helps build the second Beis Hamikdash. So there is a connection there to be made, but nonetheless, there's no Musaf, so there's no special section, there's no special anything on Hanukkah and Purim, so we need to add something into our Shemona Esrei. We need to throw them a bone, throw them a paragraph. So we give them Al Hanisa. Of course, the practical reason why is what's unique about Hanukkah and Purim versus all other Yom Tovim? Not in the Torah. Not because it's not important. My students ask, well, that means they're not important. Not necessarily. Just they were instituted after the Torah was given. So
all the fast days well, not Yom Kippur, but
right. Although the fast days are interesting because the fast days are discussed in Tanakh. Most of them, anyways. They are alluded to in Tanakh. So they're mentioned in various places in Tanakh, especially, right, we know about the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, we know about Shilas Rabbi, we know about Tzom Gedalia, we know about Sarah Teves. Titus Esther is mentioned in the Megillah that Esther fasted, so we fast. So it's a similar idea. But there is like a sort of element, it's a little more. It's like TK Nevi'im, it's called. It's like the Nevi'im established it, so it's somewhere in like the middle ground. A little more than D'Rabbanan, a little less than D'Oraisa, except for Yom Kippur, of course, which is in the Torah. Excellent. Okay, so we just mentioned the simple character, the special character, I should say, of Hanukkah and Purim in the bracha of Modim, the thanks Hashem for our salvation. That's what it's doing there. We had a harder time figuring out Yal V'Yavo and Ritzeh, trying to figure out why that is. I think everyone can understand the whole idea of Hanukkah and Purim is giving thanks to Hashem for saving us. Hanukkah spiritually, Purim physically, put them together, and that's kind of what Judaism is. But we do it in Modim to thank Hashem for our salvation. Okay, what else is thrown into Modim at the end? It's a pretty big paragraph. We got a lot of Modim, if you think about it. It's the only bracha that has our own paragraph that we have to say every day as a repetition. It's the only one that has, we have Al Nisim, so Chanukah 8 days a year times 3, Purim, I guess 3 tefilos on Purim. So we're saying that 27 times. A lot of times that we say Al Nisim if you think about it. What else is in? Oh, we mentioned it a long time ago, Birchas Kohanim. So Birchas Kohanim is towards the end there. We don't think of it as Modim, but it's before the bracha. So it's a long paragraph, a long bracha, a lot going on. So Ashkenazic custom, we mentioned this, I guess a year ago at this time, is that we don't say Birchas Kohanim outside of Israel every morning. As you know, anyone married to a Kohen? There we go. We got a winner. Okay. She should sit in the front. She should not. I'm kidding. But it's true. So you've been to Israel at some point in your life, and you've seen the duchening that takes place every day. Very cool, right? Some Kohanim tell me when they go to Israel, they stay away from minyan because they don't want to. Okay, all right. To each his or her own. But it's pretty cool that you go and you show up on a Tuesday morning and they're duchening. And as an American, you're kind of conditioned to think shlosh regalim and that's it. But it's pretty special. But the truth is that it's more that it's special in Israel. It's more sad that it's here, that we don't have that every day. We should have it every day. Why don't we duchen every day? We're busy. That's the discussion. The Ramah says, many suggest we're too busy. We're running around. It's harder to make a living. It's this, it's that, which is ironic if you think about it. But is what it is. But we're too busy. There are other reasons given. Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if this is a reason or not. Unfortunately, if you do something every single day, it loses
for sure
some of its shine.
For sure.
And maybe they didn't want Birchas Kohanim to fall into that. That you
yeah,
just
but
get out there, go do it, and you're finished.
Yeah, so then don't say Shemona Esrei every day. So
right.
until yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right, and it's a fair point to make. Do you want to say? So where do you draw the line? Do you say, okay, Birchas Kohanim, we can't do that every day, but everything else we'll do every day? What are we eliminating from our tefilah? So it's a great point. And it's interesting going to Israel and seeing that and having that dynamic and then coming back and it's I don't know, depressing. Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know. It's a fair point to make that definitely makes you appreciate it. It's I think that it's kind of like we always say this, but it's true. to help you appreciate something. So yeah, so if you have it every day, so then you're gonna appreciate it less. So the idea brought down, according to many, we know, at least if we're following the order of how many aliyos we read per the Yom Tov, right? That the more aliyos you have, that's more Torah. So it's probably the holier the day. Generally speaking, a very simple way of looking at it. So, for example, Sukkot, Pesach, all Yom Tovim have five. I'll start over. Monday, Thursday, 3 aliyos, not so holy. Rosh Chodesh, a little holier, not like Shabbos, right? But holier, 4 aliyos. Chol HaMoed, kind of like Rosh Chodesh, right? We're it's still Chag, but like we're allowed to do Malacha. 4. So you get my drift? You're following a pattern? Yom Tov itself, Sukkot, Pesach, actual Yom Tov, 5. Holier. Each one is a little holier. Yom Kippur, 6. Shabbos, 7. So that means, on a simple understanding of this idea, Shabbos is the holiest day of the year, right? I mean, Shabbos is holy. We never think of it that way, right? But it's also, on a simple halachic level, that's why Yom Kippur can fall on Shabbos, right? Because Shabbos has the opportunity to override. We can override itself, but it's like the king, so to speak. So it can give itself over, if you will. So then why is Shabbos not as holy as Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, second day Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot even, Pesach? Why is Shabbos not as holy as that? You have it every week. You have it every week. It loses its... if we had Shabbos once a year, trust me, people would appreciate it more. But it's the greatest Yom Tov, the greatest day of it's the holiest day of the year. It just happens every week. So, but I believe that. I always tell the analogy to the students about their parents. If you saw your parents once a year, you get along with them more. You'd appreciate. You'd be so happy to see them. And some of you are saying, "Yeah, I see my kids once a year, and that's why I no." But it's true. It's true. And they can. An 8th grade girl can wrap their head around that. Yes, if I saw them, I would be. Think. I always tell them the example. Think about how happy you are after you get home from summer camp. You haven't seen them in a month, maybe, right? And you're excited. You're happy. They don't bother you as much. The things they say don't make you roll your eyes. Right, so it's the same thing. If you saw your parents once a year, yeah, you'd have a special relationship. You'd have a great relationship. Interesting. The Gemara we're learning Monday night shiur about the mun. The mun. The Gemara asks actually a fascinating question. The mun we know fell every day. Well, 6 days a week, 24/6, as they say. Right, it fell only 6 days a week. Double on Erev Shabbos for Shabbos, as we know, why we have Lechem Mishta, why we have 2 chalas. So it's also going to come up in the parsha. So the Gemara asks, out of all the questions it could ask about the mun, why didn't Hashem have the mun fall once a year? Once a year. I know what you're thinking. So one of the answers is fresh. Come on. That's why I ordered the bagels today and not Friday. Right? It would have been easier. Would have been much easier to order the bagels on Friday. It was right there, but it's nice to have fresh bagels and who knows, maybe they're baked.
Wasn't the whole part of the mun though? You weren't allowed to save it.
Very good. So another opinion, excellent, is that you couldn't save it, so it had as part of the Emunah factor, right? That's true. And then, you say, one answer is because to make it fresh. Yeah, don't suggest that Hashem couldn't figure out a way to keep mun fresh. The whole idea, think about it, just food dropping on your doorstep, like exactly based off the individual needs. You have 4 kids, you have 2 kids, you have 20 kids, and it's falling in the exact proportion, focusing on the Gemara says, this one needs this, you have allergies, you have that, you have this. The whole idea is absolutely miraculous. That's something that we can't even appreciate to, even any extent. So Hashem could have figured out a way to make it fresh.
You need to make some effort.
Says the Gemara, it gives a mushal. Very good. With the king gives, he has a prince. So he's trying to get the prince some independence. So what does he do? He gives him an allowance. So he gives the prince an allowance once a year. How often does the king see the prince? Once a year. So the king says, instead of giving $365 a check once a year or whatever, I'll give $1 a day. Right? So the king sees the prince every single day. That's why Hashem gave us the money every single day. So we have to daven, part of the Emunah factor, but we'd have to daven every single day. So, of course, the Gemara seems to understand the idea that it did lose its fact. It did lose its excitement because it was every single day. Yes, absolutely. Same thing with Shabbos. It loses its excitement because it's every single week. I hate to say, I'm sorry to say. So the truth is that that Birchas Kohanim, maybe you could say that, where Birchas Kohanim, would lose its excitement. somewhat. The Ramah says, interestingly enough, you know why we don't say it in America every day? Because an interesting answer. What? No, because in order, you have to be besimcha to offer Birchas Kohanim. Interesting way of looking at life in America, right? And the Ramah is talking about Poland in the 16th century. Just give me just think about that for a second. Fine, but he says we're in exile, we're in Egalus, so we can't possibly be thinking about be besimcha in exile every day. So we don't do it. We introduce a substitute for Birchas Kohanim on occasions when we should say it, but don't. So that's only Shachris or Musaf. So that's why we say it only. Whenever we say that substitution, right, that we have the great paragraph that you see, which is Birchas Kohanim, it's just said by the Chazan, not by Kohanim. Just said very quickly. If you've noticed, I'm sure you've noticed on Shabbos as well. Mm-hmm. So we say that anytime we would ordinarily be saying Birchas Kohanim. Okay, we'll finish with this one more idea. So why do we say this in the bracha of Modim then? Right? What are we doing? I understand the whole idea of the salvation of the Purim story of Hanukkah, so we're thanking Hashem. That's our way of thanking Hashem, not just a simple thumbs up text message. Correct. So where else would you say it?
Right, so it's not a bakasha.
Yeah, she could be Shevach. Could be Shevach.
We finished bakashas.
Well, no, she's saying, well, of course it can't be in the bakasha section. It's not a bakasha. Okay, so what about Shevach? Praise.
Section.
Right, so why, I think Francine's asking, why is it in this section and not, I understand why it's not in the bakashas, but why Dafka right here, and you could, where else would you put it? That's your, but I would say Shevach, praise. Why not? Why can't it be, you're praising, the bracha, getting the bracha out? Could be, okay. It is appropriate in that respect. I know why it's not, you're right. You're not requesting a bracha is not a bakasha. That's true. So it actually has less to do with the bracha modim. It's more about being the bracha after Ritzeh, interestingly enough. The Gemara Megillah says that after the dedication of Mishkan, in Parsha Shmini, which we read almost always after Pesach, this year won't be because of leap year, all the sacrifices have been offered. The Torah says, "Vayisa Aaron es yadav el ha'am vayivarchein." That Aaron blessed. He offered Birchas Kohanim. When did he offer them? After the sacrifices, after the korbanos. So, where do we put Birchas Kohanim? After the sacrifices. Ritzeh, which we established last week, is all about the sacrifices. Birchas Kohanim always follows the avoda, always follows the sacrifices. So if in Ritzeh we're talking about the sacrifices, it makes sense to put Birchas Kohanim in the bracha afterwards. So it really isn't necessarily connected to Modim. I actually think that bodes well with your question, because you're saying, I understand why not Bakashos, but why not any other bracha in Modim or Shevach? So you're right, it doesn't need to be in the bracha of Modim. It has nothing to do with Thanksgiving. It just needs to be in the bracha after Ritzeh. That's the idea, because it needs to immediately follow the bracha that discusses the sacrifices. So, interesting, works well with that. Yeah.
Why does it say Va'al Hanisim? What's the Vav?
So it could be that we always said that whenever there's a Vav, so maybe that it used to be a part of a new paragraph, and we merged the paragraphs, Va'al Hanisim. But, I don't know that that's true by Val Hanisim necessarily. It could just be that it's a good way of looking at Al Hanisim, right? Vit al hanisim versus al hanisim. Okay, it's a good point. That should be our seemingly, like we said, like Yerushalayim, Vlav al Shinim. Seemingly there was always a connection to something else, but that's a good question. Are you saying something? No. So there you have it. Excellent. Okay, we get to daven for shalom, which we desperately need. We'll do that next week. Mitzvah Hashem. Start with Sim Shalom.
So
Yes.
you would think that the Birchas Kohanim should have been by Ritzeh.
You'd think, why?
Because
Just
it's
do it
connected to that
Yeah,
bracha.
or just do it at the end of Ritzeh. Right. Yeah, I guess it's the same concept where it needs to be after. I guess Ritzeh we need to kind of like Aaron waited, right, until all the korbanos were offered. Next paragraph, indent, and then he did it. So I guess we need to wait for the next paragraph. But yeah, in theory, could have stuck it in. At the end of Ritzeh, after Ritzeh. That's true. Good point. Yeah, didn't think of that. Okay, thank you for braving these elements. And, better than the snow. Nice. I guess not as slippery as last night was slippery.